Please don't hit me. I'm already hurt. The choked scream echoed through the crowded airport terminal. A woman in an impeccable white business suit, usually radiating power and authority, now crouched low, clutching her bruised shoulder. Rachel Morgan, 35-year-old CEO of Morgan Technologies, had never imagined finding herself in such a position, vulnerable, afraid, pleading for help in the midst of strangers. The man standing over her, Andrew Colfax, her business partner and board-appointed fiancé, towered with his hand still raised. His voice dropped to a menacing whisper that somehow carried through the stunned silence. "You embarrass yourself, Rachel. We're leaving." Now, the bustling Terminal C at Newark Liberty International Airport had frozen into a tableau of modern apathy. Passengers pulled out phones recording the scene. Some whispered behind their hands. No one moved to help. Celebrity drama, someone muttered, or maybe just another domestic dispute best left alone. The bystander effect in full display, a crowd of witnesses, ensuring that no one felt personally responsible to act. Only one man wearing a worn navy button-down with rolled sleeves and standing near gate C-86 with his young daughter's hand clasped in his set-down, his weathered duffel bag. Jack Miller, former Navy medic turned maintenance technician, knelt to his daughter's eye level low. "Sophie, sweetheart, stay right here with our bags. Count to 100, okay? Daddy needs to help someone." The little girl nodded solemnly, her eyes wide but unafraid. She'd witnessed her father's quiet interventions before a woman with a flat tire, an elderly man who had fallen on an icy sidewalk. At 8 years old, Sophie already understood that her father couldn't walk past someone in trouble. Jack approached with measured steps, not rushing, keeping his hands visible. His posture conveyed confidence without aggression, a skill honed during 8 years of military service. "Sir, I think you need to step back and give the lady some space." Andrew's head snapped toward Jack, eyes narrowing at this unexpected obstacle. "This doesn't concern you. Mind your own business." Jack positioned himself between Andrew and Rachel. Not confrontational, but immovable. When someone asks not to be hurt in a public place, it becomes everyone's business. I'm sure airport security would agree. The mention of security and the realization that dozens of phones were recording caused Andrew to reassess. His face transformed, anger disappearing behind a practiced corporate mask. A misunderstanding. Rachel and I were having a heated business disagreement. Rachel watched this stranger defend her with a strange detachment, as if observing a scene in someone else's life. For 3 years as CEO, she'd navigated boardroom battles and hostile takeovers with steel-spined determination. Yet here she was, frozen, her designer suit crumpled, her composure shattered by a man who controlled half her company and thought that entitled him to control her too. Jack maintained steady eye contact with Andrew. "Regardless, the lady seems to need some space. I suggest you provide it." A tense moment stretched between them before Andrew adjusted his Italian suit jacket and backed away. "This isn't over, Rachel. The board meeting is tomorrow. Be there or everything we've built collapses." His eyes flickered to Jack with naked contempt before he strode toward the terminal exit. Jack turned to Rachel, crouching slightly to meet her eye level without looming over her. His voice shifted from firm boundary setting to gentle concern. "Are you all right, ma'am? Do you need medical attention?" Rachel touched her shoulder, wincing. "I think it's just bruised." She attempted to stand, wobbling slightly on her designer heels. Jack offered his hand but didn't touch her without permission. Outside, rain lashed against the terminal windows. The September storm had grounded flights across the eastern seaboard, including Rachel's connection to Chicago and Jack's flight home to Philadelphia. "I'm fine," Rachel insisted, though her pale face and shaking hands suggested otherwise. "I just need to find a quiet place to wait out this weather delay." Sophie approached cautiously, her small pink backpack clutched to her chest. She stopped beside her father, studying Rachel with solemn blue eyes. "Your shoulder hurts. My daddy was a doctor in the Navy. He can fix it." Jack smiled gently at his daughter's simplification of his former role. "I was a medic, Soph, not exactly the same thing." The child's innocent intervention broke something in Rachel's carefully constructed professional facade. A single tear escaped, quickly wiped away. "Thank you, but I'll be fine. I just need to—" Thunder crashed outside, rattling the terminal windows. The PA system crackled to life. "Attention passengers due to severe weather conditions. All remaining flights this evening have been canceled. Please proceed to airline service desks for rebooking options. We apologize for the inconvenience. The terminal erupted into groans and frantic movement as hundreds of stranded travelers rushed toward the already forming lines at service counters. Jack glanced at Rachel, then at the growing chaos, making a quick decision. Look, my apartment is about 15 minutes from here. Sophie and I were just heading home when our flight got delayed. You're welcome to come with us, get some ice on that shoulder, and figure out your next steps somewhere quieter than this madhouse. Rachel's CEO instincts screamed about risk assessment and stranger danger, but something in Jack's straightforward offer and the open concern in Sophie's face crumbled her usual defenses. The alternative was spending hours in a crowded terminal, knowing Andrew might return. Sometimes survival required trusting an unknown variable over a known threat. That's very kind, if you're sure it's no trouble. No trouble at all, Jack assured her, lifting his duffel with one hand and offering to carry Rachel's sleek designer carry-on with the other. The trip to Jack's apartment passed in relative silence, broken only by Sophie's occasional observations about the rain patterns on the taxi window. Rachel sat stiffly, her phone buzzing incessantly with messages she ignored. Jack's building in Newark's ironbound neighborhood was modest but well-maintained. A brick walk-up with window boxes still sporting resilient autumn flowers. No doorman, no security desk, so different from Rachel's Manhattan penthouse with its multiple layers of controlled access. Sophie bounded up the stairs ahead of them, her earlier solemnity replaced by the natural energy of childhood, once back in familiar territory. We live on the third floor. There's no elevator, but Daddy says the stairs keep us healthy. As they climbed, Rachel noticed Jack subtly slowing his pace to accommodate her, though she hadn't complained. Another small kindness from a man who seemed to offer them effortlessly. Home sweet home, Jack announced, unlocking apartment 3B. It's not much, but it's ours. The apartment opened directly into a living area that somehow managed to be both modest and welcoming. Bookshelves lined one wall filled with an eclectic mix of paperbacks, children's books, and what appeared to be medical texts. A worn but clean sofa faced a small television, while a round dining table occupied the space near a compact kitchen. The most striking feature was the abundance of children's artwork displayed everywhere, taped to the refrigerator, framed on walls, even dangling from the ceiling on strings. Rachel stood awkwardly just inside the door, suddenly conscious of how out of place her Armani suit and Louboutin heels looked in this homey space. Sophie tugged at her hand. Come see my drawings. They're happy pictures. They might make you feel better. Before Rachel could respond, the child had pulled her toward the refrigerator gallery, pointing out particular pieces with pride. This one is my daddy, and this is me. And this space is for someone special we haven't met yet. Jack moved to the kitchen, filling a kettle with water. Sophie, how about you let Miss Morgan sit down? I'm going to make some tea and find an ice pack for her shoulder. Rachel Morgan, Sophie repeated, testing the name. That's pretty. Are you famous? You look like the ladies on TV who run companies. Despite everything, Rachel felt a small smile form. I run a technology company. Yes, but I'm not famous. Sophie seemed to consider this information carefully. Then why was that man being mean to you? Daddy says we should always be kind, especially to people who aren't feeling good. The simple question pierced Rachel with unexpected force. How could she explain corporate power plays and forced engagements to an 8-year-old? Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. Jack returned with a first aid kit and an ice pack wrapped in a kitchen towel. Sophie, why don't you go change into your pajamas and pick out a book for bedtime? It's getting late. Once Sophie had disappeared into her bedroom, Jack gestured toward the couch. May I take a look at your shoulder? Rachel hesitated, then nodded carefully, slipping her suit jacket down to reveal a silk blouse and the already darkening bruise where Andrew had gripped her upper arm. Jack's examination was clinical but gentle, his fingers moving with practiced confidence. He doesn't seem to have broken the skin, but you're going to have quite a bruise. Hold this ice pack on it for 20 minutes. It'll help with the swelling. Thank you. You were military, Rachel asked, trying to deflect attention from her vulnerability. Navy medic, 8 years. Got out when Sophie was 5. Jack's tone was matter-of-fact, not inviting further questions, though he added, after a moment, I did 2 tours in Afghanistan. Saw enough of patching people up to last a lifetime. Rachel nodded, understanding his reluctance to elaborate. In her world, most people couldn't wait to tell you about their accomplishments, dropping credentials and connections like breadcrumbs. Jack's quiet competence without self-promotion was refreshingly unfamiliar. I should call a hotel, Rachel said, suddenly the reality of her situation sinking in. I can't impose on you like this. Jack shrugged. It's still pouring out there and everything near the airport will be booked solid with stranded passengers. The couch pulls out into a decent bed. You're welcome to it for the night. Before Rachel could protest further, Sophie reappeared in pink pajamas covered with stars, clutching a worn copy of Charlotte's Web and a stuffed rabbit that had clearly been loved to the point of needing repairs. Are you staying with us? Sophie asked, climbing onto the couch next to Rachel with the unself-conscious ease of childhood. We have an extra toothbrush. It's still in the package. Daddy always keeps extras because sometimes I forget and drop mine in the toilet. Jack ran a hand over his face, trying to hide his amusement. Sophie? The child looked puzzled. But it's true. Rachel found herself laughing, a genuine sound that surprised her with its unfamiliarity. I would appreciate the toothbrush, toilet-free preferred. And yes, it seems I'm staying tonight if that's all right with both of you. Sophie nodded solemnly. It's all right. Daddy says helping people is important. That's why he was a doctor for soldiers. Medic Jack corrected, gently moving toward the kitchen. I'll make us some dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta with tomato sauce. Is that okay with you, Miss Morgan? Please call me Rachel. And anything is fine. I don't really cook. Sophie's eyes widened. You don't know how to cook. Not even pancakes. Rachel shook her head, strangely embarrassed. In her world, meals appeared from high-end restaurants, prepared by personal chefs, or from sleek meal delivery services. The idea of not knowing how to make pancakes had never seemed like a deficiency before. Then we'll teach you tomorrow, Sophie decided with the certainty only children can muster. Daddy makes the best pancakes. They're even better than IHOP. Jack grinned over his shoulder as he pulled ingredients from the cupboard. High praise, indeed. But for now, pasta. Sophie, why don't you show Rachel where she can freshen up? The bathroom was small but immaculately clean, with a child's step stool pushed against the vanity and cheerful fish-shaped decals on the shower curtain. Rachel stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her usually perfect makeup smudged her hair disheveled. She looked nothing like the confident CEO whose photo graced the Morgan Technologies annual report. Her phone buzzed again. 17 missed calls and 32 text messages, most from Andrew and her half-brother Richard, who controlled enough board votes to make her life miserable. The latest text from Richard was typically terse. Fix this with Andrew or lose everything. Board votes tomorrow, your choice. Rachel set the phone down, hands trembling slightly. 5 years of building Morgan Technologies from a struggling startup to a major player in biomedical software, and it could all collapse because she'd refused to become Andrew's corporate trophy wife. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Sophie's voice came through the door. Daddy says dinner's ready, and we have apple juice or water. No soda because it's bad for our teeth. Rachel splashed water on her face, straightened her shoulders, and opened the door to find Sophie waiting patiently. The child took her hand as naturally as breathing, leading her back to the kitchen where Jack had set 3 places at the table. Dinner was simple but surprisingly good. Rachel couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten at a kitchen table rather than at her desk or in a high-end restaurant negotiating some deal. Sophie dominated the conversation, jumping between topics with the non-linear logic of childhood, while Jack gently steered her back when she became too scattered. I made honor roll this month, Sophie announced, twirling spaghetti around her fork with careful concentration. Ms. Patel says my reading is 2 grades above level. That's wonderful, Rachel said, genuinely impressed. What do you like to read? Everything, but especially stories about animals and brave girls. And I like drawing the stories afterward. Sophie pointed to a crayon illustration on the refrigerator that appeared to show a girl riding what might have been a dolphin or possibly a very wet horse. Jack watched their interaction with quiet attentiveness. Sophie, finish your dinner. It's getting late. After dinner, Jack made up the couch with sheets and blankets, while Sophie insisted on showing Rachel every drawing in her current art folder. When Jack finally succeeded in getting Sophie to bed, Rachel found herself alone in the small living room, listening to the muffled sounds of a bedtime story from behind the child's door. Her phone buzzed again. A text from her assistant, this time, Rachel, please confirm you're safe. Everyone is worried. The board meeting has been moved up to 9 a.m. Andrew is saying you had some kind of breakdown. Rachel typed a quick response, I'm safe, not coming in tomorrow. Please cancel all my appointments for the rest of the week. Then she turned off her phone completely, something she hadn't done in years. Jack emerged from Sophie's room, closing the door softly behind him. She wants to say goodnight to you. Fair warning, it may involve showing you her rock collection. She's very proud of it. Rachel found herself moving towards Sophie's door without hesitation. The child's bedroom was small but cheerfully decorated in yellows and greens. Sophie sat up in bed, surrounded by an assortment of ordinary pebbles arranged on her blanket. I collected these at the park and the beach, and even one from when we visited the Grand Canyon. Sophie explained, holding up an unremarkable reddish stone. They're not fancy, but Daddy says sometimes ordinary things can be special if you love them enough. Rachel sat carefully on the edge of the bed. They're wonderful. You've collected quite a lot. Sophie nodded earnestly. Do you collect anything? The question gave Rachel pause. Her Manhattan penthouse was filled with expensive art chosen by a decorator, designer, furniture, and high-tech gadgets, but nothing she'd actually collected herself. Deals, she thought wryly. I collect business deals. Not really, she admitted. Maybe I should start. Sophie selected a smooth gray stone and placed it in Rachel's palm. You can have this one to start your collection. It's from the beach where my mommy used to take me. Rachel's throat tightened unexpectedly. She closed her fingers gently around the stone. Thank you, Sophie. I'll keep it safe. After Sophie finally succumbed to sleep, Rachel returned to the living room to find Jack sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, medical text spread before him. She's an amazing child, Rachel said, placing the stone carefully on the coffee table beside her makeshift bed. Jack's face softened. She's the best thing in my life. Always has been, but especially after we lost her mother. I'm sorry. Sophie mentioned the beach. Sarah died 3 years ago, car accident. Jack's voice was steady, but his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around his mug. Sophie was 5. Young enough to adapt, they say, but old enough to remember her mother. Sometimes I'm not sure which is worse. Rachel sat across from him, suddenly aware of how little she knew about grief. When her own parents died, her father from a heart attack, her mother from cancer 2 years later, she'd been in college, already estranged from them over her career choices. She'd handled their deaths like business transactions, arranging funerals between classes and meetings. What was she like, your wife? The question slipped out before Rachel could consider its propriety. Instead of shutting down, Jack smiled slightly. Sarah was vibrant, always laughing, always seeing the best in people. She was an elementary school art teacher. That's why our apartment looks like a gallery. She believed kids' art was the most honest expression of creativity. He gestured toward their collection of Sophie's drawings. She would have liked you. Rachel couldn't hide her surprise. You don't know me. Jack considered her for a moment. Sarah always said you could tell someone's character by how they treated children and strangers. Sophie likes you, and you needed help. That would have been enough for her. Rachel looked away unexpectedly, touched by this assessment from a woman she'd never meet. What about you? Jack asked after a moment. Any family waiting for you? Rachel's laugh held little humor. A half-brother who's trying to force me to marry my business partner to secure a merger deal. Does that count? Jack's eyebrows rose. I thought arranged marriages went out with the Victorian era, not when billions are at stake. Richard, my half-brother, controls enough board votes to oust me if I don't play along. Morgan Technologies is developing medical software that could revolutionize early cancer detection. We need capital to take it to market. Andrew Colfax has the money and connections, but he wants more than a business partnership. She gestured to her bruised shoulder. As you saw, he doesn't take rejection well, so tomorrow's board meeting is where they plan to present me with an ultimatum. Marry Andrew and secure the merger, or get pushed out of the company I built. Rachel's voice remained steady, but her hands had curled into fists on the table. Jack was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do? I don't know. Rachel admitted, the words unfamiliar on her tongue. For years, she'd been the person with all the answers, the decisive leader who never showed uncertainty. Until tonight, I thought I could handle Andrew professionally. Now I'm not so sure of all. Jack nodded, not offering platitudes or easy solutions. Sometimes life throws us curveballs that no amount of planning can prepare us for. Rachel glanced around the apartment at the children's drawings, the well-worn furniture, the textbooks spread across the table. Do you miss it? Being a medic sometimes? Jack's gaze grew distant. I was good at it, keeping people alive in impossible situations. But after Sarah died, he shook his head. Sophie needed stability more than I needed a career. So I took the maintenance job at Newark Memorial Hospital. Regular hours, decent benefits close to home. His mouth quirked in a half-smile. Not exactly where I thought I'd end up, but it works for us. You're studying, though, Rachel gestured to the textbooks. PA program, physician assistant, taking classes at Rutgers, part-time. It's slow going, but in a few years I'll have a degree that lets me practice medicine with more reasonable hours than an MD. Jack shrugged, self-conscious. Sophie will be older then, more independent. Rachel absorbed this information, struck by the careful way Jack had reconstructed his life around his daughter's needs. In her world, children were accessories to be managed by nannies while careers took priority. Jack's choices challenged her assumptions in ways she wasn't entirely comfortable examining. I should let you get some rest, Jack said, gathering his books. Bathroom's all yours. Extra toothbrushes in the medicine cabinet, as Sophie helpfully announced. Thank you. Rachel hesitated, then added, for everything. Not many people would have stepped in today. Jack met her eyes directly. More should have. Good night, Rachel. Left alone. Rachel changed into a t-shirt Jack had lent her, comically large on her frame, and settled onto the pull-out couch. The sheets smelled like lavender and safety, so different from her high-thread count linens at home that always carried the faint scent of whatever expensive fabric softener her housekeeper used. Sleep came with surprising ease, despite the unfamiliar surroundings and the looming crisis awaiting her tomorrow. Her last conscious thought was of Sophie's rock collection, ordinary things made special by love, and the unexpected refuge she'd found in this modest apartment. Morning arrived with the scent of coffee and the sound of Sophie's not-quite-whispered voice. Do you think she knows how to make pancakes yet? We should teach her, Jack's deeper voice responded with gentle amusement. Let's let her sleep a little longer, Soph. It's still early. Rachel opened her eyes to find Sophie standing beside the couch, studying her with unabashed curiosity. Good morning, the child whispered loudly. Do you want to learn how to make pancakes now? Behind her, Jack winced apologetically. Sorry, she's been up since 6, excited about her pancake teaching opportunity. Rachel sat up, running a hand through her tangled hair. She couldn't remember the last time she'd slept past 5:30 a.m. or gone without her rigorous morning routine of exercise emails and conference calls. Good morning, Sophie. I'd love to learn about pancakes. The kitchen became a cheerful chaos as Sophie appointed herself head chef, with Jack supervising to prevent complete disaster. Rachel, accustomed to precision and control in every aspect of her life, found herself covered in flour and laughing as she attempted to flip a misshapen pancake under Sophie's earnest instruction. No, you have to wait for the bubbles, Sophie corrected with the patience of a born teacher. See, like that? Now flip it quick. Rachel's attempted flip resulted in a half-folded pancake that more resembled an omelet. Sophie applauded anyway. That's okay. The messy ones taste just as good. When they finally sat down to eat, Rachel discovered the child was right. The oddly shaped, slightly charred pancake tasted better than any gourmet breakfast she could remember. How do you do this every day? Rachel asked Jack as they cleaned up after breakfast. The routine? The household management, all of it. Jack laughed a sound with little humor. I don't have it balanced. I'm making it up as I go along, hoping I don't mess her up too badly. He lowered his voice as Sophie disappeared into her room to get dressed. You're an amazing father, Rachel insisted. Anyone can see that. I'm a father who loves his daughter and tries his best. Some days that feels like enough. Other days, Jack didn't finish the sentence, but Rachel understood. She'd spent her entire adult life trying to be perfect at everything, and it had left her empty and alone. Rachel's phone, which she'd reluctantly turned back on, began buzzing with incoming messages. The board meeting was in an hour. Richard was threatening to invoke a rarely used clause in the company bylaws to force her removal if she didn't appear. Andrew had apparently spent the night calling major investors, painting Rachel as emotionally unstable and unfit to lead. I need to go, she said, reluctant in a way that surprised her. I have to face this, Jack nodded, understanding without needing the details. Sophie will be disappointed she didn't get to show you her school before we left. Do you need a ride? I'll call a car, thank you. Rachel hesitated, then added, I don't know how to thank you properly for last night. Jack waved away her words. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't. You did. Rachel held his gaze, wanting him to understand how significant his intervention had been. Not just at the airport, but the sanctuary he'd provided afterward. Sophie bounded back into the room, dressed in a purple jumper with mismatched socks. Are you leaving? Her disappointment was palpable. Rachel knelt to the child's eye level, something she'd seen Jack do. I have to go to work, but thank you for teaching me about pancakes and showing me your wonderful art. Sophie considered this, then ran to her room, returning with a crayon drawing. You can take this. It's for when you feel sad. It's extra happy. The drawing showed three stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun surrounded by colorful flowers. Rachel recognized Sophie and Jack, but the third figure was a mystery. Is this me? Sophie shook her head. That's the someone special we haven't met yet, but you can borrow it until then. Rachel carefully folded the drawing and placed it in her bag, throat tight with an emotion she couldn't name. Thank you, Sophie. I'll keep it safe. Outside waiting for her car, Rachel turned to Jack. You could have judged me. Most people would have, seeing a woman like me, a CEO unable to handle her own problems. Jack shrugged, the morning sunlight catching the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. Life's too short for judgment. We're all just trying to get through our days the best we can. As her car arrived, Rachel impulsively reached out to shake his hand. If you ever need anything, a reference for your PA program, help with Sophie's education, anything, please call me. She pressed her business card into his palm. Jack accepted the card with a nod. Good luck with your board meeting. Driving toward Manhattan, Rachel watched Newark recede in the rear window. In less than 24 hours, her perspective had shifted in ways she was still processing. She'd been so focused on building her company, proving herself in a male-dominated industry, that she'd constructed her entire identity around professional success. The simple human connections she'd witnessed between Jack and Sophie, the unguarded love, the everyday courage of rebuilding a life after tragedy felt more authentic than anything in her carefully curated existence. By the time the car reached Morgan Technology's gleaming headquarters, Rachel had made a decision. She texted her assistant, have the legal team meet me in my office before the board meeting. Bring the company charter and all documentation on the proposed Colfax merger. The assistant's reply was immediate. They're waiting. Richard and Andrew are already in the boardroom. Are you okay? Rachel touched her bruised shoulder, felt the small stone from Sophie's collection in her pocket, and thought of Jack's quiet strength. No, I'm not okay, but I'm going to be. Stepping into the building's soaring lobby, Rachel noticed for the first time how cold it felt despite its architectural beauty, like a museum rather than a place where real people worked. As the elevator carried her toward the executive floor and the confrontation awaiting her, she found herself thinking of Sophie's drawing of three figures under a bright sun. There was something profound in the child's vision, the space left for someone not yet known, the trust that they would eventually arrive. The elevator doors opened onto the familiar corridor leading to her office. Her assistant hurried toward her, concern evident. Rachel, thank God. Everyone's been so worried. Rachel held up a hand, silencing the younger woman with a gesture she'd used countless times before. But this time she softened it with a smile. I'm fine, and after today I'm going to be even better. The legal team rose as she entered her office, their expressions a mixture of concern and professional detachment. Rachel took her seat at the head of the table, opened her laptop, and began to speak with the clarity that had made her one of the youngest female CEOs in the tech industry. I need options for retaining control of our cancer detection software while severing ties with Colfax Industries, and I need them in the next 30 minutes. As her team scrambled to meet her directive, Rachel opened a new document and began typing a letter of resignation, not from her company, but from the life she'd been leading. In her mind, she could hear Sophie's earnest voice explaining her drawing. This space is for someone special we haven't met yet. Rachel smiled to herself. Perhaps that someone wasn't a person at all, but a version of herself she'd never allowed to exist, someone who valued pancake lessons in children's drawings as much as board meetings and billion-dollar deals. Someone who recognized that power came in many forms, and not all of them could be measured in market share or stock prices. With newfound clarity, she finished her letter, saved the document, and stood to face the boardroom. Whatever happened next, she would no longer be defined solely by her title or her company's success. Like Jack rebuilding his life around what truly mattered, she would find her own path forward, one that might include space for pancakes on weekday mornings and drawings on the refrigerator door. As Rachel walked toward the boardroom, shoulders squared and head high, she felt the weight of Sophie's small stone in her pocket, an ordinary thing made special by love, and knew with sudden certainty that she was finally heading in the right direction. The double glass doors of the Morgan Technologies boardroom swung open with the weight of history being made. Rachel entered not with the frantic energy of someone running late, but with the measured confidence of a woman who had made a life-altering decision. The morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating 14 faces frozen in various states of surprise and calculation. Richard Morgan, her half-brother, broke the silence first. "Nice of you to finally join us, Rachel. We were beginning to think you'd abandon your responsibilities entirely." Rachel set her portfolio on the polished mahogany table, taking in the scene. Richard at the far end, always positioning himself in opposition. Andrew Colfax to his right arm, casually draped over the back of his chair, his expression a practiced mask of concern that didn't reach his eyes. The 12 board members arranged like jurors, their loyalties already divided. "I've never abandoned my responsibilities, Richard. In fact, I take them more seriously today than ever before." Rachel remained standing, a power move she'd learned early in her career. "But I've come to realize that my responsibilities extend beyond quarterly projections and shareholder value." Andrew leaned forward, adjusting his Italian silk tie. "We've been worried about you, Rachel. After your episode at the airport yesterday, I feared for your mental state." The pressure of leadership clearly weighs heavily. The room tensed at this reference. Several board members exchanged glances, sensing the undercurrent. Rachel noticed Janet Chen, the only other woman on the board, studying her with particular intensity. "My mental state is perfectly clear, Andrew. Unlike my shoulder, which still bears the mark of your grip." Rachel turned slightly, ensuring the bruise visible beneath her sleeveless blouse could be seen by everyone at the table. "I believe several airport witnesses captured your behavior on video. Would the board be interested in reviewing that footage?" A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. Richard's jaw tightened as he assessed the shifting dynamics. "That's an unfortunate mischaracterization of a private disagreement," Andrew countered, his voice honey smooth, but his eyes flashing warning. "I reached out to steady you during an emotional moment. Any bruising was unintentional." Rachel allowed the lie to hang in the air for a moment before pulling a document from her portfolio. "I've prepared a statement about yesterday's events should anyone require clarification. But I'm more interested in discussing the future of Morgan Technologies, specifically our cancer detection software, and the proposed merger with Colfax Industries." She distributed copies of a detailed legal brief, watching as confusion replaced certainty on several faces. Richard snatched his copy, scanning it with narrowing eyes. "What is this?" Richard's voice rose sharply. "You can't seriously be suggesting we abandon the Colfax merger. It's the only path forward for bringing our technology to market." "Not the only path." Rachel finally took her seat, spreading her own copy of the brief before her. "Our legal team has identified 3 alternative funding structures that would allow us to maintain controlling interest while securing the necessary capital. I've already reached out to Horizon Ventures, and they've expressed preliminary interest." The room erupted into chaos, board members talking over each other, Richard slamming his hand on the table, Andrew's facade of concern giving way to naked anger. Through it all, Rachel remained still, her gaze steady. She thought of Jack's quiet strength in the airport terminal, his refusal to be intimidated by Andrew's bluster. The memory centered her. When the noise reached its peak, Rachel didn't shout. She simply stood, again the movement so deliberate that it pulled focus. "Let me be clear about what's happening here." Rachel's voice cut through the cacophony, measured but unyielding. "For the past 6 months, my half-brother and Mr. Colfax have been orchestrating a hostile takeover disguised as a merger. The condition that I enter into a personal relationship with Mr. Colfax was presented as necessary for investor confidence. But the legal team has discovered that the true purpose was to trigger Clause 27B of our charter, which would transfer controlling shares to Richard in the event of my marriage." Janet Chen's eyebrows rose sharply. "You were being coerced into marriage as a business transaction," Richard cut in before Rachel could respond. "That's a dramatic oversimplification. The merger requirements were standard procedure for ensuring long-term alignment between key stakeholders. By forcing your sister to marry Andrew, Janet pressed her financial expertise, momentarily eclipsed by human disbelief." "No one was being forced into anything," Andrew interjected smoothly. "Rachel and I have had a professional relationship for years. It was evolving naturally toward personal territory. The merger simply provided a convenient timeline." Rachel let the absurdity of his statement linger before tapping the legal brief. Page 4 details a series of texts and emails between my brother and Mr. Colfax discussing, and I quote, how to lock Rachel into an arrangement she can't wiggle out of. The referenced arrangement was not just the merger, but a prenuptial agreement designed to trigger additional stock transfers if I sought divorce within 10 years. A shocked silence fell over the room. Even board members loyal to Richard appeared disturbed by this revelation. Stanley Weiss, the longest-serving member, removed his glasses slowly. If these communications are authentic, this constitutes a serious breach of fiduciary duty. Stanley's legal background lent weight to his assessment. The board would have a responsibility to investigate. Richard's face flushed deep red. This is absurd, Shibokur. You're manufacturing a scandal to distract from your own instability. Rachel met her half-brother's gaze directly. I spent the night in a stranger's apartment, Richard, because I was afraid to return to my own home after Andrew's display at the airport. I slept on a pull-out couch while trying to decide if my life's work was worth submitting to emotional and physical intimidation. This morning, I watched an 8-year-old girl make pancakes with more joy than I've felt in years running this company. She smiled thinly. I'm not manufacturing anything. I'm finally seeing clearly. Andrew pushed back from the table, his chair screeching against the hardwood floor. This is nothing but emotional manipulation. Your personal crisis doesn't change market realities. Without the Colfax merger, Morgan Technologies will be unable to bring its cancer detection software to market, and years of work will be wasted. Rachel nodded, acknowledging the concern. The technology is too important to risk. That's precisely why I've developed these alternative funding structures to ensure our work reaches the patients who need it without compromising the company's independence. She turned to address the full board, her passion for the technology momentarily overshadowing the personal drama. Our algorithm can detect pancreatic cancer 18 months earlier than current methods with a 94% accuracy rate. That translates to thousands of lives saved annually. I refuse to use those lives as leverage in a power play. The meeting stretched for 3 more hours, evolving from confrontation to tentative problem solving, as board members digested the legal brief and began engaging with the alternative funding proposals. Throughout, Rachel maintained the calm certainty that had descended upon her that morning. When Andrew attempted to discredit her mental stability again, she simply played a video that had surfaced on social media of their airport encounter, letting his actions speak for themselves. By meeting's end, the board had voted to pause the Colfax merger, pending full review of Rachel's allegations and exploration of the alternative funding paths. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was breathing room. As members filed out, Janet Chen lingered. That was either the bravest or the most reckless thing I've seen in 20 years of corporate governance. Janet's expression mixed admiration with concern. You've made powerful enemies today. Rachel gathered her materials, suddenly exhausted now that the adrenaline was ebbing. I've spent 5 years trying to prove myself in rooms like this, Janet, always calculating the political impact of every word, every decision, always trying to appear twice as confident while feeling twice as scrutinized. She closed her portfolio with a decisive snap. I'm done playing that game. The work matters, the technology matters, everything else is just noise. Outside the boardroom, Rachel's assistant waited anxiously, clutching a tablet displaying dozens of meeting alerts and message notifications. Rachel, there are 17 urgent calls waiting, including the Wall Street Journal asking for comment on rumors about the merger collapse. And your calendar for the rest of the week, dear Emily. Rachel gently took the tablet and powered it down, returning it to her startled assistant. I'm taking a personal day. Cancel everything. A personal day? You haven't taken one since I started 3 years ago. Rachel stepped into the elevator, pressing the lobby button. Then I'm overdue, wouldn't you say? The autumn air hit Rachel's face as she exited the gleaming Morgan Technologies tower. For the first time in memory, she had no meetings scheduled, no conference calls pending, no crisis demanding immediate attention. The sensation was simultaneously liberating and terrifying. She stood on the busy Manhattan sidewalk, momentarily adrift in a sea of purpose-driven pedestrians. Her phone buzzed with Richard's name displayed on the screen. She declined the call and powered off the device entirely, just as she had the previous evening in Jack's apartment. The parallel wasn't lost on her. In less than 24 hours, she disconnected twice from the technological tether that had defined her existence for years. Rachel hailed a taxi, giving the driver an address in Newark's ironbound neighborhood before she could second-guess herself. The journey across the Hudson felt symbolic, leaving behind the gleaming glass towers of corporate Manhattan for the more textured landscape of New Jersey. As the cab navigated through the late morning traffic, Rachel touched the small gray stone in her pocket, a tangible reminder of the unexpected sanctuary she'd found. Jack's building looked different in daylight, more worn around the edges, its brick facade showing patches where repairs had been made over decades. Rachel hesitated at the front entrance, suddenly uncertain. What was she doing here, Jack? And Sophie would be gone, he to his maintenance job at the hospital, she to her elementary school. The brief intersection of their lives had served its purpose. They'd given her safe harbor when she needed it most, and she'd move forward with a new perspective. There was no reason to return, and yet she couldn't make herself walk away. Something about the modest apartment with its refrigerator gallery of crayon art and the pull-out couch with lavender-scented sheets had awakened a longing she'd been suppressing for years. Not for luxury or success, but for authenticity, a life where joy came from pancake lessons rather than closed deals. A woman emerged from the building juggling groceries and keys, and Rachel impulsively caught the door before it closed. Her corporate confidence momentarily returning, she strode toward the stairs as if she belonged there. 3 flights up, she found herself staring at the door to apartment 3B, hand raised to knock when doubt crashed over her again. This was ridiculous. Inappropriate even. What would she say? Thank you again for the rescue, and by the way, your life has triggered an existential crisis about my own choices. She lowered her hand, turning to leave when the door swung open. Jack stood in the threshold, still in hospital maintenance blues, surprise evident in his expression. Rachel, the single word held a question mark so prominent it seemed to hover in the air between them. Rachel fumbled for an explanation that wouldn't sound completely unhinged. I was in the neighborhood after my board meeting. I wanted to thank you properly for yesterday. Maybe replace the groceries we used. Her words tumbled out embarrassingly inadequate. Jack stepped back from the doorway, an implicit invitation to enter. I'm on my lunch break. The hospital's only a few blocks away. Sophie's at school until 3. Rachel entered immediately, noting the pull-out couch had been returned to its daytime configuration. The sheets she'd slept on were probably already through the wash. Nothing remained of her presence, except perhaps a lingering awkwardness. How did the board meeting go? Jack moved to the kitchen, reaching for the coffee pot with the ease of routine. I resigned as CEO. The words escaped before Rachel had fully processed their implications. Jack turned coffee pot, suspended midair. That's a big decision. Rachel sank onto the couch, suddenly needing to sit. I didn't plan to say that. I didn't even plan to do that. Her laugh held a note of hysteria. I went in prepared to fight for my company, to expose the manipulation and find an alternative path forward. And I did all that, got the board to pause the merger, presented alternative funding options, even showed them the bruise Andrew left. Jack set 2 mugs of coffee on the small table sitting across from her in the chair that presumably belonged to him, its cushions shaped to his form by years of use. So what changed between then and now? His question held no judgment, only genuine curiosity. Rachel cradled the mug, its warmth grounding her. Everything changed. Or maybe nothing did. Maybe I just finally admitted what I've known for a long time. She looked up, meeting Jack's patient gaze. Do you know what I felt in that boardroom today? Not triumph when I outmaneuvered Richard. Not satisfaction when the board voted to review my proposals. Not even relief when I escaped Andrew's scheme. I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. The admission hung in the air between them, more revealing than Rachel had intended. Jack didn't rush to fill the silence, allowing her words the space they needed. For 5 years, I've been so focused on proving myself, on building Morgan Technologies into something meaningful. Rachel traced the rim of her mug, organizing her thoughts. The cancer detection software we're developing, it could save thousands of lives. That's what kept me going through all the politics and posturing. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself in the mission. She looked around the modest apartment with its evidence of a life fully lived. You have so little compared to what I've accumulated, yet everything here feels purposeful. Chosen. Mine feels assigned, like I've been playing a role in someone else's life. Jack considered her words carefully before responding. Purpose isn't found in what we have or even what we accomplish. It's about who we become in the process. The simple wisdom struck Rachel with unexpected force. Who had she become? A woman so disconnected from joy that a child's pancake lesson had felt revolutionary, so isolated that a pull-out couch in a stranger's apartment offered more comfort than her luxury penthouse. I don't even know who I am outside of Morgan Technologies anymore. The admission cost her each word, a surrender of the carefully constructed image she'd maintained for years. Jack set his mug down, leaning forward slightly. Then maybe it's time to find out. Their conversation was interrupted by Jack's phone alarm lunch break over reality intruding. He stood reluctantly gathering his keys. I have to get back to work. But his hesitation was brief, barely perceptible. Sophie would love to see you again. We usually have dinner around 6 if you'd like to join us. The invitation hung between them, casual on the surface, but weighted with possibility. Rachel found herself nodding before conscious decision could intervene. I'd like that, if you're sure it's not an imposition. Jack's smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. Sophie will make me set an extra place anyway. She's been talking about you all morning. Apparently you need more pancake practice. After Jack left for work, Rachel remained in his apartment, absorbing the stillness. The space felt different without its inhabitants, quieter, but still infused with their essence. Sophie's artwork, Jack's medical textbooks, the family photos displaying moments from a life built on love rather than achievement. One photograph on the side table caught Rachel's attention, a woman with Sophie's smile and a cascade of auburn hair laughing at the camera from a beach blanket. Sarah, Jack's wife, the woman who had believed you could judge character by how someone treated children and strangers. Would Sarah approve of Rachel's presence in her family's home? The thought brought an unexpected pang. She was, after all, an interloper, a corporate executive having a breakdown, imposing on the kindness of a widowed father and his daughter. Rachel's phone, still powered off, weighed in her pocket like a neglected responsibility. The real world waited beyond this temporary sanctuary, board members requiring guidance, media demanding statements, Richard and Andrew undoubtedly plotting their next move. Her declaration of resignation had been impulsive, born of emotional exhaustion rather than strategic thinking. With reluctance, she turned the device on, watching as notifications flooded the screen. 28 missed calls, 47 text messages, 63 emails flagged urgent. The digital manifestation of the life she'd built, each alert, a thread tethering her to obligations and expectations. The most recent text from her assistant popped up. Rachel, where are you? The board is in emergency session. Richard is claiming your resignation was evidence of mental breakdown. They're discussing invoking the incapacity clause. Rachel stared at the message, feeling strangely detached from its urgency. 24 hours ago, such a text would have sent her racing back to the office, prepared for battle. Now she found herself wondering what would happen if she simply didn't. If she let Richard take the company, let the board invoke whatever clauses they wished. What would remain of Rachel Morgan if Morgan Technologies no longer defined her? The question lingered as she left Jack's apartment, locking the door with the spare key he'd entrusted to her. Outside, the afternoon had turned gusty, autumn leaves skittering across the sidewalk in rust-colored ballets. Rachel wandered through the ironbound neighborhood, noting the Portuguese bakeries and Spanish restaurants that gave the area its distinct character. So different from the sterile luxury of her Manhattan world, where even diversity felt curated and commodified. Rachel found herself outside an unassuming storefront with a sign reading Bowman, Newark Women's Resource Center. Through the window, she glimpsed a reception area where a gray-haired woman was assisting a young mother with paperwork. Something about the scene drew Rachel inside, perhaps the evident care in the older woman's posture, or the relief visible on the younger woman's face. The interior was modest but welcoming, with mismatched furniture arranged in conversational groupings and walls covered with resource posters and children's artwork. The gray-haired woman looked up as the door chimed. Welcome to the Newark Women's Resource Center. I'm Maria. How can we help you today? Rachel hesitated, suddenly aware that she had no clear reason for entering. I'm just looking, I suppose. Her gaze traveled over a bulletin board covered with flyers housing assistance legal aid job training programs. Maria studied her with the shrewd assessment of someone who had seen every type of crisis. Looking is a good place to start. Would you like some coffee while you look? Just made a fresh pot. The simple offer of coffee without expectation or agenda Felt like a gift. Rachel nodded, following Maria to a small kitchenette area in the back of the center. While Maria poured 2 mugs, Rachel noticed a young woman in the adjacent room struggling with a computer frustration evident in her hunched shoulders. Excel trouble. Rachel recognized the distinctive grid lines of the spreadsheet program from across the room. The young woman looked up, startled by the accurate assessment from a stranger. Yeah, I'm trying to make a budget for my apartment application, but I can't get the formulas to work. Without conscious decision, Rachel found herself crossing to the small computer desk. May I? For the next hour, Rachel lost herself in the surprisingly fulfilling task of teaching the young woman Tanya, a single mother of 2, leaving an abusive relationship, how to create a functional budget spreadsheet. She explained formulas and formatting, helping Tanya organize her limited income and expenses into a document that would strengthen her housing application. When they finished, Tanya's eyes shone with a mixture of gratitude and newfound confidence. This is going to make such a difference. Thank you so much. Tanya saved the file with reverent care as if it contained far more than numbers and formulas. Most people just tell me what to do. You showed me how to do it myself. The simple appreciation hit Rachel with unexpected force. When was the last time she directly improved someone's life? Not through corporate philanthropy or the abstract future benefits of medical technology, but through immediate person-to-person connection. As Tanya left with her printed budget, Maria reappeared at Rachel's side. That was quite impressive. We could use skills like yours around here. Most of our volunteers are big on heart, but short on technical knowledge. I was just passing by. Rachel struggled to articulate her temporary status in this unexpected scenario. Maria's smile suggested she'd heard similar protests before. Well, if you're ever passing by again, we're here Tuesday through Saturday. There's always someone who could benefit from what you know. The invitation lodged in Rachel's mind as she left the center, continuing her aimless exploration of the neighborhood. A volunteer position at a community resource center couldn't be further from her role as CEO of a biotech company. Yet the hours spent helping Tanya had provided more immediate satisfaction than months of executive decision-making. By late afternoon, Rachel found herself drawn to the elementary school, where Sophie attended, timing her arrival with the final bell. She stood across the street watching as children poured from the building in colorful waves. Sophie emerged clutching a stack of papers, her face lighting up with recognition as she spotted Rachel. You came back. The child's joy was uncomplicated, free from the calculations that would have accompanied an adult's reaction. Rachel knelt to Sophie's eye level, conscious of matching Jack's approach. I did. Your dad invited me for dinner tonight. Are you going to sleep on our couch again? Sophie's directness brought a smile to Rachel's face. No, not tonight. I have my own place to stay. Sophie nodded, processing this information. But you'll come visit us, right? I have to teach you more about pancakes. You only learned the basics. Before Rachel could respond, a woman approached, eyeing Rachel with undisguised suspicion. Sophie, honey, who is this? Sophie beamed up at the newcomer. This is Rachel. She's the lady Daddy helped at the airport. She slept on our couch and doesn't know how to make pancakes. The woman's expression shifted from suspicion to understanding, tinged with curiosity. I'm Karen Wilson, Sophie's after-school supervisor. Jack usually picks her up at 6 when he finishes work. Rachel straightened, extending a hand. Rachel Morgan. Jack invited me for dinner tonight, and I thought I'd surprise Sophie after school, but I realized I should have checked the protocols first. Karen's handshake was firm, her assessment continuing. Jack texted me that you might show up. Said to tell you Sophie's program is at the community center 3 blocks down if you wanted to wait there. They're doing art projects today, Sophie's favorite. Rachel glanced down at Sophie, who was practically vibrating with excitement at this unexpected development. Would that be all right? Me joining you at the community center? Sophie grabbed Rachel's hand in answer, already tugging her in the right direction. You can help me with my drawing. I'm making a rainbow family of cats. The community center art room buzzed with the controlled chaos of 20 elementary schoolers engaged in creative expression. Rachel found herself seated at a small table beside Sophie, handed a set of markers, and enlisted as assistant color consultant for a series of increasingly fantastical feline creations. Time slipped away as Rachel entered Sophie's world of imagination, where purple cats could have wings and green whiskers made perfect sense. The corporate executive who navigated billion-dollar negotiations with ruthless precision disappeared, replaced by a woman who deliberated seriously over whether turquoise or teal made a better color for Kat's sunglasses. When Jack arrived at 6, he paused in the doorway, taking in the scene of Rachel and Sophie bent over their collaborative artwork, heads close together in concentration. Something in his expression, a softness, a hesitation, caught Rachel's attention when she looked up. Daddy Sophie bounded across the room, artwork held high. Rachel helped me make a whole rainbow family. See, the baby cats have spots like their mom, but stripes like their dad. Jack examined the drawing with appropriate paternal appreciation. This is definitely refrigerator-worthy art, Soph. Rachel gathered her belongings, suddenly self-conscious about her impulsive decision to intercept Sophie after school. I hope it was okay that I came by. Karen said you texted about it. Jack's smile dispelled her concern. More than okay. Sophie hasn't stopped talking about you since this morning. He lowered his voice slightly. Fair warning, she's already planned our entire evening, including a tour of her school, a stop at her favorite playground, and something involving her rock collection that I didn't quite follow. Rachel found herself returning his smile without reservation. Sounds perfect. The evening unfolded exactly as Sophie had orchestrated, a guided tour of her elementary school, surreptitiously accessed through an unlocked gymnasium door, followed by playground adventures, where Rachel was coaxed into attempting the monkey bars for the first time since childhood. By the time they reached Jack's apartment for the promised rock collection presentation, Rachel's designer blazer was smudged with chalk dust, and her carefully styled hair had succumbed to playground wind. Jack prepared a simple dinner while Sophie arranged her geological treasures on the coffee table, explaining the origin and special properties of each with scientific seriousness. Rachel found herself fully engaged in the child's enthusiasm, asking questions and handling each specimen with the reverence it deserved in its collector's eyes. Dinner's ready, adventurers. Jack set 3 plates on the small kitchen table. Nothing fancy, just grilled chicken and vegetables, but the aroma made Rachel realize how long it had been since she'd eaten. The meal was punctuated by Sophie's breathless recounting of their afternoon adventures, with particular emphasis on Rachel's less-than-graceful dismount from the monkey bars. Jack listened with the attentive patience of a father accustomed to his child's storytelling style, offering encouraging nods and appropriate questions at just the right moments. When the conversation lulled, Jack turned his attention to Rachel. Any word from your company about the resignation? Rachel set down her fork, the question pulling her back to the reality she'd been avoiding all afternoon. My assistant texted that the board was meeting an emergency session. Apparently, my half-brother is suggesting I had some kind of breakdown. Do you regret it, making the announcement, I mean? Jack's question carried no judgment, only genuine interest. Rachel considered, carefully aware that Sophie was listening while pretending to focus on her dinner. I regret the timing and the impulsiveness, but not the decision itself. I've been unhappy for a long time without admitting it. She glanced at Sophie, then back to Jack. Today was the first day in years I've felt present, not constantly checking emails or planning my next strategic move, just experiencing whatever was happening in that moment. Sophie looked up from her plate, like when we were drawing the rainbow cats, exactly like that. Rachel smiled at the child's perceptiveness. When we were drawing, I wasn't thinking about anything else. It was just us and the cats with sunglasses. Daddy says that's called mindfulness. Sophie pronounced the word carefully, clearly, repeating something she'd heard often. Being right where you are, instead of worrying about other places. Jack nodded, a flicker of pride crossing his features. That's right, Soph. Your mom was good at that, being fully present wherever she was. He turned to Rachel. Sarah used to say worrying was just borrowing trouble from tomorrow, using today's energy. The mention of Sarah brought a comfortable poignancy to the conversation. Rather than avoid the topic, as many might have, Jack spoke of his late wife naturally keeping her memory present in their daily lives. After dinner, while Jack helped Sophie with her homework at the kitchen table, Rachel found herself drawn to the small balcony overlooking the street. The evening air carried the first hint of October chill leaves from a nearby maple tree, occasionally drifting onto the concrete slab. In one corner stood several terracotta pots, most empty for the season, but one still nurturing a resilient marigold. Rachel crouched to examine the flower, its orange petals vibrant against the deepening dusk. She touched the soil, finding it dry, and impulsively reached for the small watering can left nearby. That was Sarah's garden. Jack's voice came quietly from the doorway. She loved having growing things around us, even in a small apartment. I try to keep it going, but I don't have her touch. Rachel straightened, wondering if she'd overstepped. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. No, please. Jack stepped onto the balcony, the small space bringing them closer than either might have intended. It's good to see someone caring for it. Sarah would have approved. They stood in companionable silence, watching twilight settle over Newark. The city stretched before them, not as dramatically vertical as Manhattan's skyline, but alive with the warm glow of neighborhood windows and street lamps flickering to life. What will you do now? Jack finally asked, giving voice to the question that had hovered unspoken throughout the evening. Rachel leaned against the balcony railing, considering. I honestly don't know. I've never been without a detailed 5-year plan before. Her laugh held equal parts liberation and terror. Today, I helped a woman at a community center create a budget spreadsheet, and it felt more meaningful than my last board presentation. Is that strange? Jack shook his head, joining her at the railing. Not strange at all. Sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest impact. Sarah used to volunteer at that same center teaching art therapy on weekends. Really, Victory? Rachel turned to face him, struck by the coincidence. I just wandered in by chance this afternoon. Maybe not entirely by chance. Jack's expression held a thoughtfulness that suggested he was considering larger patterns at work. The universe has interesting ways of guiding us where we need to be. The conversation shifted to Jack's work at the hospital, the satisfaction he found in maintaining the systems that kept the facility running, his part-time studies toward becoming a physician assistant, the balance he continually sought between ambition and presence in Sophie's life. I don't always get it right. Jack admitted, his gaze drifting back to where Sophie could be seen through the window, now reading on the couch. Some days I'm so tired from juggling everything that I'm not the father she deserves. Other days I worry I'm not pushing hard enough toward the PA certification that could give us a better life. His honesty touched something deep in Rachel. Her entire career had been built on projecting unshakable confidence, never admitting doubt or vulnerability. Yet here was Jack, openly acknowledging his struggles without it diminishing him in the slightest. In fact, his self-awareness only made him more authentic. From what I can see, you're exactly the father Sophie needs. Rachel spoke with the conviction of someone who recognized quality parenting despite limited exposure. The way she talks about you, the security she feels, that doesn't come from perfection. It comes from knowing she's loved unconditionally. Jack's expression softened at her words. That goes both ways, you know. She saved me after Sarah died. There were days I couldn't see the point in getting out of bed, but Sophie needed breakfast and help with her shoes and someone to cheer for her wobbly bicycle attempts. He traced a pattern in the condensation forming on the railing. When you have someone depending on you completely, you find strength you didn't know you had. Rachel thought of Morgan Technologies, the employees who depended on her leadership, the patients who might benefit from their medical software. She told herself for years that her devotion to the company was about responsibility to others. But standing on Jack's modest balcony, watching him speak about his daughter with such unguarded love, she recognized the fundamental difference. Her sense of corporate responsibility had been entangled with ambition, ego, and the need to prove herself. Jack's commitment to Sophie came from a purer place, one where personal sacrifice was given freely without calculation of return. You've built something beautiful here. Rachel gestured to encompass the apartment, the evidence of a life centered on love rather than acquisition. Something real. Jack considered her words, his gaze thoughtful. It's not what Sarah and I planned. We had a house in the suburbs before she died, had to sell it when I left my hospital administration job to find something with regular hours for Sophie. This apartment was supposed to be temporary. He smiled ruefully. 3 years later, it's home. The sky deepened to indigo as they talked street lights, creating pools of illumination below. Inside, Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch, her book still clutched in small fingers. Jack noticed first, excusing himself to carry his daughter to bed. Rachel watched through the window as he gently lifted the child, Sophie instinctively wrapping her arms around her father's neck without fully waking. The moment struck Rachel with unexpected force, the simple, profound intimacy of a parent caring for a sleeping child. In her pursuit of corporate achievement, she'd never seriously considered motherhood. Children had seemed like complications in the meritocratic formula she'd constructed for her life, variables that would derail the careful trajectory toward success. Yet watching Jack with Sophie awakened questions Rachel had long suppressed. When Jack returned to the balcony, Rachel found herself speaking thoughts she'd barely acknowledged to herself. I never wanted children. Or rather, I never let myself want them. They didn't fit into my career aspirations. Jack leaned against the doorframe, neither encouraging nor discouraging her confession. And now Rachel looked out at the city lights, considering. Now I wonder what else I didn't let myself want because it didn't fit my plan. Her voice softened. What else I might have missed? Jack was quiet for a moment, weighing his response. It's never too late to rewrite the plan. The simplicity of his statement resonated with unexpected depth. Rachel turned toward him, struck by how comfortable she felt in this man's presence, despite having known him less than 48 hours. In him, she recognized something increasingly rare in her experience, a person wholly aligned with his own values without performance or pretense. How did you know? Rachel asked suddenly. At the airport when everyone else was just watching or recording on their phones. How did you know to step in? Jack considered the question carefully. I didn't think about it honestly. I just saw someone in trouble and reacted. He shrugged slightly. Maybe it comes from medical training. You're taught to move toward emergencies, not away from them. But it was more than training, Rachel pressed, needing to understand the character of this man who had so unexpectedly altered her life's course. Most people don't intervene even when they should. They rationalize, they hesitate, they decide it's not their problem. Jack's expression grew more serious. After Sarah died, I was in a pretty dark place for a while. One day I was sitting on a park bench, Sophie was playing nearby, and I was just done. Couldn't see how we'd go forward without Sarah. An older woman sat down beside me, complete stranger, and started talking about her garden. Said she'd lost her husband 20 years earlier and had given up gardening after he died because it was their shared passion. Rachel listened, sensing the importance of this story in Jack's journey. What happened? She told me she'd wasted 5 years wrapped in grief before a neighbor forced a tomato seedling on her. Said that putting her hands back in the dirt saved her life, not all at once, but one growing season at a time. Jack's eyes held a distant memory. Before she left, she put her hand over mine and said, "Don't try to save everyone. Just hold the hand of someone who's trembling until they can stand." The words hung in the night air between them, simple yet profound. Rachel thought of her own trembling at the airport, the steadiness Jack had offered, without expectation of return. That woman changed how I see the world. Jack continued after a moment. When someone needs help, really needs it, you don't walk past. You stop. You reach out. It's not heroic. It's just human. Rachel's phone vibrated in her pocket, the real world intruding again. She checked the screen, reluctantly finding another urgent message from her assistant. Board meeting ended. Richard named interim CEO. Press conference tomorrow morning. Please call ASAP to coordinate response. The news should have devastated her, the company she'd built now in her half-brother's control. Yet Rachel felt a surprising lightness, as if a burden had been lifted rather than imposed. They've named my brother interim CEO. Rachel tucked the phone away, her tone more resigned than bitter. Press conference tomorrow to announce the transition. I'm sorry. Jack's sympathy was genuine, free from the calculation that would have accompanied such a statement in her corporate circles. Will you fight it? Rachel turned the question over in her mind, examining it from angles that wouldn't have occurred to her 24 hours earlier. Not for the title or the power, no, but for the cancer detection software that's worth fighting for. She met Jack's gaze directly. The technology we've developed could save thousands of lives. I won't let Richard shelve it or repurpose it just to spite me. Jack nodded, understanding her distinction. Sometimes we have to separate what we do from who we are. Find the core purpose underneath the titles and trappings. As the evening grew later, Rachel reluctantly acknowledged the need to leave. Jack called a taxi, waiting with her on the sidewalk outside his building. The night had turned chilly, stars visible in patches between scattered clouds. Thank you for dinner. And for the playground adventure and the rainbow cat art, and Rachel gestured vaguely, unable to adequately express the full scope of what the day had meant to her, for showing me a different way to live. Jack's smile held no expectation, no demand for reciprocity or continuation. Anytime. Sophie will be asking about you for weeks. As the taxi approached, Rachel felt a sudden reluctance to return to her empty penthouse with its designer furniture and spectacular views. The contrast between Jack's home, modest in size but rich in meaning, and her own carefully curated space had never seemed starker. "I'd like to see Sophie again. And you?" Her voice came out more tentative than she'd intended, the confident CEO momentarily replaced by a woman unaccustomed to making personal rather than professional overtures. "We'd like that too." Jack's response was immediate without calculation. "Maybe this weekend, there's a farmer's market on Saturday morning that Sophie loves. You could practice your pancake skills afterward." The taxi pulled to the curb, waiting. Rachel hesitated, then impulsively reached for Jack's hand, placing her palm against his, in echo of the story he'd shared. "Thank you for holding my hand when it was trembling." Their fingers intertwined briefly, a moment of connection that carried more meaning than either might have articulated. Then Rachel stepped back, opening the taxi door. "Saturday morning, I'll bring maple syrup." As the taxi pulled away, Rachel watched Jack's figure grow smaller in the rear window. For the first time in her adult life, she was moving forward without a detailed plan, no 5-year strategy, no carefully plotted career trajectory, not even certainty about tomorrow's press conference. Yet the anxiety such uncertainty would have previously triggered was notably absent, replaced by a quiet anticipation for whatever might come next. Rachel Morgan, former CEO, reached into her pocket and touched the small gray stone from Sophie's collection. An ordinary thing made special by love. Perhaps that was the secret she'd been missing all along. That value wasn't determined by market capitalization or corporate achievements, but by the genuine connections we forge and the hands we hold when they're trembling. The taxi crossed the bridge back toward Manhattan's city lights, reflecting on the dark river below. Rachel didn't turn her phone back on, choosing instead to watch the night scenery unfold. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Tonight she would simply be present in this moment of transition, this journey from who she had been toward who she might become. The Saturday morning farmers market filled Newark's ironbound neighborhood with vibrant energy. Vendors arranged under white canopies showcased fall harvests. Pumpkins in varying sizes, apples in jewel tones from ruby to emerald, and gourds twisted into fantastical shapes. Rachel arrived 15 minutes early, an old habit from countless business meetings now serving a new purpose. She wore jeans for the first time in years, paired with a simple sweater that cost a fraction of her usual attire. The transformation went beyond clothing. The rigid tension that had characterized her CEO posture had softened, allowing her shoulders to relax and her stride to lengthen. Jack spotted her first, raising a hand in greeting from near a produce stand where Sophie was seriously examining a butternut squash nearly half her size. Rachel wove through the crowd, struck by the genuine pleasure warming her chest at the sight of them. 3 days had passed since their dinner together. 3 days of upheaval as Rachel navigated the aftermath of her resignation and the media storm surrounding Morgan Technology's leadership change. "Good morning, pancake student." Sophie beamed up at Rachel, temporarily abandoning her squash assessment. "Daddy got special maple syrup for our lesson today." Rachel held up the bottle she'd brought. "I came prepared too. Looks like we'll have options." Jack's smile reflected a mix of welcome and something less definable. "You survived the press conference, I see." The press conference had been exactly as brutal as Rachel had anticipated. Richard Morgan smugly announcing the board's difficult but necessary decision to appoint him interim CEO while making thinly veiled references to Rachel's personal challenges. Andrew Colfax, standing strategically in the background, had maintained an expression of practiced concern. Most painful had been watching the cancer detection project Rachel had championed reduced to a bullet point in Richard's vision for the company's future, mentioned just enough to appease investors but stripped of urgency and passion. Survived is the right word. Rachel shifted the conversation away from corporate politics. "This market is amazing. I can't believe I've lived so close to this for years and never visited." Sophie tugged Rachel's hand. "Wait till you see the honey stand. The lady lets you taste all the different kinds." For the next 2 hours, Rachel experienced the farmer's market through Sophie's expert guidance. The child led her from vendor to vendor with the confidence of a seasoned tour guide, introducing Rachel to the honey seller, who indeed offered generous samples, the cheesemaker, whose goat varieties earned Sophie's highest recommendation, and the apple farmer, who knew Sophie by name and saved her favorite variety, Honeycrisp, for her weekly visit. Throughout their market exploration, Rachel observed Jack's interactions with the community. Unlike her former life, where professional relationships were carefully calculated for maximum advantage, Jack moved through the market with easy familiarity. He chatted with vendors not to negotiate better prices or secure preferential treatment, but from genuine interest in their lives. When the elderly woman selling knitted goods mentioned her arthritis was acting up, Jack promised to drop off a specific type of compression gloves his hospital carried. When the teenage boy managing the vegetable stand shared news about his college acceptance, Jack's congratulations carried the warmth of someone who had been hearing about these applications for months. This web of authentic connections struck Rachel profoundly. In Manhattan, her social interactions had been transactional. Charity galas attended for networking opportunities, dinners with potential investors, even friendships maintained primarily with those who served strategic purposes in her career advancement. Jack's approach couldn't have been more different. He invested in relationships simply because people mattered to him. Their market visit culminated at a bakery stand where Sophie insisted Rachel try a Portuguese pastry filled with sweet egg custard. The three of them sat on a nearby bench enjoying their treats, while Sophie recounted a school project on butterfly migration with exuberant detail. Watching Sophie's animated explanations frosting dotting her chin, Rachel felt a contentment so foreign it took her a moment to identify it. Nothing about this moment advanced her career or enhanced her status. No deliverables awaited completion, no metrics tracked success. Yet she felt more fully present, more genuinely alive than during any corporate achievement. The pancake lesson that followed at Jack's apartment transformed the small kitchen into a laboratory of culinary experimentation. Sophie, taking her role as instructor, seriously supervised Rachel's technique with exacting standards. The key is patience, Sophie explained, watching Rachel's hesitant attempt at flipping. You have to wait for all the bubbles before you flip, not just some bubbles. Rachel, who had once negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts without breaking a sweat, found herself nervously awaiting Sophie's verdict on her third attempt. The pancake landed on the griddle with minimal splatter, its golden brown surface a marked improvement over her previous efforts. Sophie inspected the result with professional scrutiny. Much better. Now you're getting it. Jack watched from the doorway, amusement playing across his features. Careful, Rachel. Before you know it, Sophie will have you enrolled in culinary school. The domesticity of the scene, flour dusting the countertop, the warm scent of cooking batter. Sophie's proud instruction created a sense of belonging that Rachel had never experienced in her meticulously designed penthouse. When they finally sat down to enjoy the fruits of their labor, Rachel found herself studying both Jack and Sophie with new awareness. In just 1 week, these two people had transformed from strangers into something approaching family, an impossible development, according to Rachel's previous understanding of relationship progression. How's the job search going? Jack cut into a stack of pancakes, the question casual but attentive. Rachel had spent the past 3 days exploring options she would never have considered a week earlier. I've had offers from 3 competing tech firms and 2 venture capital groups, all contingent on bringing my cancer detection research with me, of course. And Jack's question held no pressure, merely interest. Rachel set down her fork, considering. I've turned them all down. I spent yesterday looking into nonprofit options instead, organizations focused on healthcare access for underserved communities. Places where the technology could reach people who need it most, not just those who can afford premium insurance. Sophie looked up from carefully arranging blueberries into a smiley face on her pancake. Like helping people at the Women's Center. Rachel nodded, touched by the child's attentiveness. Exactly like that. Maybe not as directly, but with the same goal, making life better for people who need help. Jack studied her with quiet intensity. That's a significant shift from corporate leadership. The past week has made me reconsider what success actually means. Rachel's gaze met Jack's across the small table. I built Morgan Technologies to create medical innovations that would help people. Somewhere along the way, market share and profit margins became the metrics that mattered most. I lost sight of the purpose beneath the ambition. The remainder of the day unfolded with comfortable ease, a trip to the park where Sophie demonstrated her improving skills on the monkey bars, followed by an impromptu stop at a local bookstore where Rachel found herself drawn to volumes on nonprofit management and social entrepreneurship. By early evening, when Rachel finally prepared to leave, a sense of reluctance slowed her steps. Standing at the door of Jack's apartment, Rachel found herself searching for reasons to linger. You're sure you don't need help with Sophie's science project? I'm surprisingly knowledgeable about ecosystem dioramas. Jack's expression softened with understanding. The science project isn't due for 2 weeks, but we're going to the Newark Museum tomorrow afternoon if you'd like to join us. They have a new exhibit on medical innovations through history that Sophie's been asking to see. The invitation brought immediate relief, as if a lifeline had been extended when Rachel hadn't even realized she was drowning. I'd like that very much. Sophie appeared beside her father, clutching a drawing. This is for your refrigerator, so you'll remember today. Rachel accepted the artwork, a colorful rendering of 3 figures surrounded by what appeared to be giant pancakes with faces. The thoughtfulness of the gift, Sophie's assumption that Rachel would want to remember their day together, created a lump in her throat that made speaking difficult. Thank you, Sophie. It's perfect. Outside autumn, twilight painted the street in muted gold. Rachel turned to Jack, finding herself uncharacteristically hesitant. Thank you for today, for letting me be part of your Saturday. Jack's smile reached his eyes, creating fine lines that spoke of genuine emotion rather than practiced charm. You make Sophie happy. She doesn't open up to many people the way she has with you. The simple statement carried weight far beyond its words. Rachel had built her career on strategic thinking and calculated risks, yet her growing connection to Jack and Sophie defied such rational analysis. In a single week, these two people had become inexplicably important to her, a reality both exhilarating and terrifying in its vulnerability. As her taxi pulled away, Rachel watched Jack and Sophie waving from the sidewalk, their figures growing smaller, but remaining clear in her mind's eye. For the first time in years, her thoughts weren't consumed by work concerns or career strategies. Instead, she found herself wondering what exhibit at the museum would most interest Sophie, whether Jack's studies were progressing well, what other activities they might enjoy together. The realization struck with unexpected force. She wasn't just interested in their lives. She wanted to be part of them. The depth of this desire after knowing them such a short time should have triggered her usual caution. Instead, it felt like recognition rather than discovery, as if some part of her had been waiting to find exactly these people. Rachel's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Janet Chen, the board member, who had shown her the most support during the leadership transition. Rachel considered ignoring it, reluctant to return to corporate concerns, but something in her newfound perspective prompted her to answer. Janet's voice came through with characteristic directness. Rachel, I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. The cancer detection project is being sidelined. Richard is redirecting the research team to focus on a cosmetic application algorithm that Colfax once prioritized. The news hit Rachel with a surge of anger that surprised her with its intensity. They're shelving cancer detection for cosmetics. That's profit-driven and completely legal, according to our bylaws. Janet's frustration matched Rachel's own. The team is devastated, especially Dr. Patel. He's threatening to resign. Dr. Amit Patel had been the brilliant researcher whose early algorithm had formed the foundation of their cancer detection work. His dedication to medical innovation had inspired Rachel's own commitment to the project. The thought of his groundbreaking research being abandoned for a beauty app twisted something deep in Rachel's chest. What can I do? My resignation is final, Janet. I don't have any leverage with the board anymore. You still own 20% of the company, and your name carries weight with investors who backed your vision specifically. Janet's tone shifted from frustrated to strategic. There's a venture forum at Princeton next weekend. Richard will be presenting the new direction to potential investors. If you showed up with a counter proposal, Rachel's mind immediately began calculating possibilities, old instincts reawakening. I'd need the latest research data, team assessments, budget projections. I can get you everything by Monday. Janet's determination came through clearly. This isn't about corporate politics anymore, Rachel. This is about whether a technology that could save thousands of lives gets developed or shelved. After ending the call, Rachel sat in her penthouse surrounded by minimalist luxury that suddenly felt hollow. The contrast between her Saturday with Jack and Sophie and this reminder of her former world created cognitive dissonance she couldn't ignore. For years, she'd convinced herself that corporate success was a necessary vehicle for creating meaningful impact. Now she questioned whether the vehicle had become the destination itself. Rachel spent Sunday morning organizing notes and preparing for the week ahead. By noon, restlessness drove her from the penthouse, her thoughts repeatedly drifting to the museum visit she'd agreed to join. She arrived early, purchasing tickets and waiting in the grand entrance hall, where marble columns supported a dome ceiling painted with historical scenes. The sight of Jack and Sophie coming through the main doors sent an involuntary smile across Rachel's face. Sophie spotted her first breaking away from her father to race across the polished floor. You came early. Sophie's delight was unrestrained. Now we can see everything before closing time. Jack approached at a more measured pace, his expression warm but carrying subtle concern. Everything okay? You seemed a little distracted when you left yesterday. Rachel hesitated, then opted for honesty. I got some troubling news about the cancer detection project. My brother is redirecting the research toward cosmetic applications instead. Jack's brow furrowed with genuine dismay. That's terrible. After all the work your team put into developing something that could save lives, the simple, immediate understanding of why this mattered without questions about market viability or investor returns reinforced Rachel's growing clarity about her priorities. I'm not going to let it happen without a fight. I'm presenting an alternative funding proposal at a venture forum next weekend. Sophie, impatient with adult conversation, tugged at both their hands. Can we start with the dinosaurs first, please? The afternoon unfolded through museum galleries, Sophie's enthusiasm infectious as she darted between exhibits. In the medical innovation section, Rachel found herself particularly engaged, explaining to Sophie how various devices had transformed healthcare over centuries. Jack watched their interaction with thoughtful attention, occasionally adding insights from his medical background. When they reached a display on contemporary medical imaging, Rachel paused before a panel describing early cancer detection technologies. This is similar to what my team was working on, using algorithmic analysis to identify cellular changes that human eyes might miss. Sophie studied the display with serious concentration. So computers help doctors find sick cells before they make people really sick. Exactly. Rachel knelt to Sophie's level, unexpectedly moved by the child's straightforward understanding. The earlier doctors can find these cells, the better chance people have of getting well again. Like finding a tiny fire before it burns down the whole house, Sophie's analogy carried the wisdom of childhood simplicity. Rachel glanced up at Jack, finding him watching them with an expression that caught her breath, admiration mixed with something deeper she wasn't ready to name. That's a perfect comparison, Sophie. And that's why I need to make sure this technology doesn't get abandoned. Later, as they shared early dinner at the museum cafe, Jack broached the subject again. What's your strategy for the venture forum? Rachel outlined her approach, drawing on business instincts honed over years of corporate leadership. I need to demonstrate that the cancer detection algorithm has greater long-term profit potential than cosmetic applications. Investors respond to return projections more than humanitarian appeals. Jack considered her words carefully. Is that really true, all investors? The question gave Rachel pause. The venture capital world she'd navigated for years operated on clear metrics: risk assessment, scalability, market penetration, projected returns. Social impact had been a secondary consideration at best, a marketing angle at worst. Not all know. There's a growing sector focused on impact investing, placing capital in projects with measurable social benefits alongside financial returns. Rachel's mind began working in new directions. I've never seriously explored those channels before. My approach has always been traditional venture funding. Sophie, coloring on her kid's menu, looked up with unexpected insight. Maybe you need different people to help you. People who care about the same things you do. The simplicity of the child's observation struck Rachel with the force of revelation. For 5 years, she'd been pitching Morgan Technologies to investors who prioritized profit above all else, then wondering why the company's direction had drifted from its original humanitarian mission. Out of the mouths of babes, Jack smiled at his daughter with quiet pride. Sophie has a knack for cutting to the heart of matters. Rachel reached for her phone, typing a quick note before returning her full attention to their meal. You're absolutely right, Sophie. I've been talking to the wrong people. The remainder of their evening together carried a sense of shared purpose that deepened their connection beyond the comfortable companionship of the previous day. When Jack invited Rachel to join them for dinner at their apartment the following evening, her acceptance came without hesitation. Monday morning found Rachel transformed from displaced CEO to woman on a mission. She contacted Dr. Patel directly, arranging to meet him away from Morgan Technologies' offices. Janet forwarded internal documents showing the cancer detection project's development timeline and budget allocations. By afternoon, Rachel had drafted a comprehensive proposal for an independent research entity focused solely on bringing the cancer detection technology to market, particularly to underserved healthcare settings. When she arrived at Jack's apartment that evening, she carried not just takeout from a recommended Portuguese restaurant, but also a folder of notes she was eager to discuss. Sophie greeted her with customary enthusiasm, immediately pulling Rachel to see a school project displayed on the kitchen table, a solar system model constructed from painted styrofoam balls and wire hangers. I made Saturn's rings from my old bracelet, Sophie pointed out the glittery detail with evident pride. Ms. Patel says it's very creative problem solving. Rachel examined the model with genuine admiration. The creativity is impressive. Saturn's rings are perfect. Jack emerged from the bathroom, toweling his hair dry, evidently just home from work and showered. Sorry, maintenance emergency at the hospital ran late. Burst pipe in the radiology department. The domesticity of this moment, Jack freshly showered Sophie's school project on the table. The aroma of takeout food waiting to be shared created a tableau of ordinary family life that Rachel had never experienced. The sense of belonging that washed over her was both comforting and disorienting. How had these people become so important to her so quickly? Throughout dinner, Rachel shared her developing plans for saving the cancer detection research, finding in Jack not just a sympathetic ear, but a thoughtful sounding board. His questions, coming from outside the corporate bubble, often highlighted assumptions she'd taken for granted. So these impact investors, they're still expecting financial returns. Jack passed the container of grilled vegetables, their conversation flowing naturally alongside the meal sharing. Yes, but with longer horizons and more emphasis on measurable social outcomes. Rachel considered how to explain the nuance. They're looking for sustainable models that solve real problems, not just quick profits. The cancer detection algorithm could be licensed to hospitals at premium rates in wealthy countries while using a sliding scale for facilities in underserved areas. Sophie, listening while attempting to twirl pasta with mixed success, looked up. Like when Ms. Wilson gives extra snacks to kids who forget their lunch, but doesn't tell anyone, so they don't feel bad. Rachel and Jack exchanged glances, both struck by the child's intuitive grasp of ethical distribution. Exactly like that, Sophie. Some hospitals can afford to pay more, which helps cover costs for hospitals with fewer resources. After dinner, while Sophie finished homework at the kitchen table, Rachel and Jack moved to the small balcony. The October evening carried a definite chill, now prompting Rachel to accept Jack's offered sweatshirt, a worn Navy Medical Corps hoodie that enveloped her in both warmth and a scent she was coming to associate with safety. You seem different today. Jack leaned against the railing, studying her with attentive eyes. More focused, more yourself somehow. Rachel considered his observation, recognizing its accuracy. I feel more aligned with my purpose than I have in years. Fighting for this project outside corporate constraints, it's clarifying. She pulled the sweatshirt closer, organizing her thoughts. For so long, I convinced myself that traditional success was necessary to create meaningful impact. Build the company, secure investor confidence, achieve market dominance, so eventually we could develop technologies that actually help people. And now Jack's question invited deeper reflection rather than simple response. Now I'm wondering if I had the equation backwards all along. Rachel met his gaze directly. What if impact isn't what happens after success, but is itself the definition of success? The conversation shifted to Jack's own journey, his struggle to balance single parenthood with professional ambitions, his determination to complete the PA program despite financial constraints in limited time. As they talked, Rachel found herself increasingly drawn to this man whose definition of success centered on integrity and care rather than status or wealth. When Jack described his challenges finding reliable childcare that aligned with hospital maintenance shifts, Rachel recognized a practical problem she could help address. The Women's Center where I've been volunteering has an after-school program. Several of the staff members are certified childcare providers who might be interested in evening hours. Jack's expression registered surprised gratitude. You've been thinking about our challenges. The question carried undertones that made Rachel pause, suddenly aware of how her involvement in their lives might appear. I hope that's not overstepping. Jack shook his head, interrupting her concern. Not overstepping at all, just unexpected. Most people in my experience don't listen closely enough to remember details like childcare logistics, let alone offer solutions. The week that followed established a pattern that felt both new and somehow familiar. Rachel divided her days between developing her independent research proposal, volunteering at the Women's Center, and evenings with Jack and Sophie. She helped Sophie with homework, joined Jack in cooking simple meals, and found herself increasingly integrated into their daily rhythms. On Wednesday evening, Rachel arrived to find Jack unusually tense, his typical easy manner replaced with distracted concern. Sophie was already in bed, though it was earlier than her normal bedtime. "Everything okay?" Rachel set down the file she'd brought to review, immediately sensing something amiss. Jack ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized indicated stress. Sophie had a rough day at the school. One of her classmates made comments about her not having a mother, suggested our family wasn't real because it's just the two of us. Protective anger flared in Rachel's chest. "That's horrible. How is she doing?" Putting on a brave face, but I could tell it hit hard. Jack's concern was etched in the tightness around his eyes. "She asked questions about Sarah tonight that she hasn't brought up in over a year. Wanted to know if her mother would be fine that it's just us now." Rachel's heart ached for both of them, Sophie, wrestling with complex emotions about absence and belonging. Jack trying to navigate his daughter's pain while managing his own. "What did you tell her the truth?" "That Sarah would want her to be happy, that families come in all different forms, and that love defines family more than numbers or structure." Jack's expression reflected both confidence in his message and uncertainty about its reception. Then she asked if you were going to be part of our family now. The question hung between them, carrying weight far beyond a child's innocent inquiry. Rachel felt her pulse quicken, aware they had reached a threshold neither had explicitly approached until now. "What did you tell her?" Rachel's voice emerged softer than intended, the question carrying her own unvoiced hopes and fears. Jack met her gaze directly, vulnerability and strength coexisting in his expression. "I told her that I didn't know what the future held, but that people who care about each other find ways to be in each other's lives even when it's complicated." The careful honesty of his answer, neither promising what he couldn't guarantee nor dismissing the possibility of deeper connection, touched Rachel profoundly. 3 weeks earlier, she would have analyzed such a statement for strategic implications and hidden agendas. Now she recognized it as something far more valuable, authentic truth offered with both courage and restraint. Sophie is lucky to have a father who respects her enough to be honest even when the answers aren't simple. Rachel moved closer to Jack, drawn by something stronger than conscious decision. "I care about both of you, more than I can make logical sense of given how recently we met." Jack's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with natural ease. Logic isn't always the best measurement for what matters. They stood together on the small balcony, the autumn night wrapping around them as their conversation deepened. For the first time, Rachel spoke freely about her own family history. Her emotionally distant parents who had valued achievement above affection, her half-brother, Richard, whose resentment of their father's favoritism had curdled into adult manipulation. In return, Jack shared more about his life with Sarah, their college romance, their early struggles as he completed medical training, their shared dreams of a large family interrupted first by fertility challenges and then by her sudden death. The exchange flowed without the performative quality that had characterized Rachel's previous relationships, where personal disclosures were calculated for specific effects. Saturday morning arrived with crisp autumn sunshine, the venture forum at Princeton looming just hours away. Rachel had prepared meticulously all week, refining her presentation with input from Dr. Patel and insights from Jack's outsider perspective. Now standing in her penthouse closet selecting her outfit, Rachel found herself torn between old and new instincts. Her hand hovered over a severe black designer suit that had been her corporate armor for years, structured shoulders, razor-sharp lapels, intimidation woven into its very fabric. Beside it hung a recent purchase, a deep blue blazer with softer lines paired with tailored trousers. The difference was subtle but significant, reflecting her evolving understanding of how power could be projected without requiring emotional walls. Rachel opted for the blue, adding a simple silver necklace Sophie had admired during their museum visit. The child's voice echoed in her mind, "It looks like a crescent moon protecting a little star." The poetic description had stayed with Rachel, prompting her purchase of the piece after dropping Sophie at school the following day. Jack and Sophie were waiting outside the Venture Forum venue when Rachel arrived, their presence a surprise that immediately steadied her pre-presentation nerves. Sophie bounded forward, wrapping her arms around Rachel's waist. "We came to cheer for you," Daddy said. You're going to be amazing and save your cancer-fighting computer." Rachel looked to Jack, touched by the unexpected support. "You didn't have to drive all the way to Princeton on your Saturday." Jack shrugged, his casual gesture belying the significance of the effort. "Sophie and I agreed some things are worth showing up for." The simple statement carried profound meaning for Rachel, who had grown accustomed to facing professional challenges alone. Throughout her career, she had prided herself on self-sufficiency, viewing emotional support as unnecessary at best and distracting at worst. Yet the sight of Jack and Sophie waiting outside, having rearranged their weekend plans, driven nearly an hour, created a foundation of strength unlike anything she'd experienced before. Inside the auditorium, Rachel spotted familiar faces from the venture capital world, noting with grim satisfaction Richard's evident shock at her appearance. Her half-brother had clearly not anticipated her counter-move, his whispered conference with Andrew Colfax broadcasting their concern. Richard recovered quickly, approaching with practiced corporate smoothness. "Rachel, what an unexpected surprise. I wasn't aware you had projects to pitch today." "I'm not here to pitch a project, Richard." Rachel maintained professional composure, despite the anger simmering beneath. "I'm here to ensure the cancer detection technology reaches the patients who need it, rather than being repurposed for beauty filters." Richard's expression hardened, the mask of collegiality slipping. "That technology belongs to Morgan Technologies. Any attempt to develop it independently would constitute intellectual property theft." Dr. Patel developed the core algorithm before joining Morgan Tech. Rachel had prepared for this confrontation, her legal position carefully researched. His employment contract specifically preserved his rights to applications in diagnostic medicine. "I've reviewed all the documentation with outside counsel." As Richard processed this setback, his gaze shifted to Jack and Sophie seated in the audience. His voice lowered to ensure privacy. "So, this is what your breakdown has led to. Playing house with some maintenance worker and his kid. The Rachel Morgan I knew was destined for greater things than domestic mediocrity." The attempt to wound missed its mark entirely. 6 weeks earlier, such a comment might have triggered Rachel's deeply ingrained fears about sacrificing professional achievement for personal connection. Now it merely revealed how fundamentally Richard misunderstood what constituted greatness. The Rachel Morgan you knew was terrified of being unexceptional, Richard. She measured her worth exclusively through professional achievement, because that's what our father taught us mattered. Rachel glanced toward Jack and Sophie, drawing strength from their presence. "I've discovered there are other metrics for a meaningful life." Richard's presentation came first, his polished delivery outlining Morgan Technology's new strategic pivot toward consumer applications. Rachel noted key investors shifting uncomfortably as Richard deliberately minimized the cancer detection project, describing it as promising but commercially challenging in current healthcare markets. The underlying message was clear. Life-saving technology was being abandoned because cosmetic filters promise faster returns. When Rachel's turn came, she approached the podium with calm determination rather than the aggressive confidence that had characterized her previous investor presentations. Her opening slide displayed not market projections or competitive analyses, but a simple graph showing cancer survival rates correlated with detection timelines. "The technology we've been discussing today isn't abstract. It's the difference between a death sentence and a treatable condition for thousands of patients annually." Rachel allowed her genuine passion to infuse her words, abandoning the detached corporate delivery she'd perfected over years. "Our algorithm can detect pancreatic cancer an average of 18 months earlier than current methods with 94% accuracy. For a disease with one of the lowest survival rates, those 18 months translate directly into lives saved." She proceeded to outline her proposal for an independent research entity focused specifically on bringing the detection technology to market, particularly in underserved healthcare settings. The business model was innovative, but sound premium licensing for wealthy markets, subsidizing implementation in resource-constrained environments, creating both humanitarian impact and sustainable revenue streams. The question and answer session that followed revealed shifting investor interest, with several key figures specifically engaging with the dual-purpose model Rachel had presented. Throughout, Rachel maintained authentic connection with her audience, responding to challenges with thoughtful consideration rather than defensive counterarguments. When the formal presentations concluded, Rachel found herself surrounded by investors eager for follow-up conversations. She navigated these exchanges with new perspective, assessing not just the financial resources each potential backer offered, but also their alignment with her core mission. Janet Chen appeared at her elbow during a brief lull, approval evident in her expression. "You found your voice again, Rachel. Not the corporate voice, your real one." The observation resonated deeply. For years, Rachel had cultivated a professional persona designed to succeed in male-dominated tech leadership, authoritative, unemotional, strategically aggressive. Today, she had presented as herself, passionate about impact, collaborative rather than combative, motivated by purpose beyond profit. Across the reception area, Rachel spotted Jack and Sophie waiting patiently, the child engaged in creating an elaborate doodle on the back of a program, while Jack chatted with an elderly professor emeritus. The sight created a gravitational pull stronger than the networking opportunities surrounding her. Excusing herself from conversations with practiced grace, Rachel made her way toward them, her professional and personal worlds converging in a moment of clarity. Sophie spotted her approach first, holding up her drawing with characteristic enthusiasm. "I made this for your new company. It's a computer that can see inside people to find the sick spots before they get too big." Rachel accepted the artwork, genuinely moved by Sophie's interpretation of her work. "This is perfect, Sophie. You understood exactly what we're trying to create." Jack's expression carried quiet pride in his daughter's perception in Rachel's presentation and the integrity of purpose that had defined her approach. "You were extraordinary up there, not just knowledgeable, but authentic." People responded to that authenticity more than any market projection. The observation aligned with Rachel's own assessment. 3 investors had already requested private meetings to discuss funding the independent research entity. The venture forum had succeeded beyond her strategic expectations, yet the moment that mattered most was now standing with Jack and Sophie, sharing the victory with people who valued her purpose more than her business acumen. As they left the auditorium together, Rachel found herself walking between Jack and Sophie, the child's small hand slipping naturally into hers, while Jack carried her presentation materials. The tableau they presented to outsiders, indistinguishable from any family leaving a school event, felt both new and somehow predestined, as if Rachel had been unconsciously searching for exactly this connection all along. Several weeks later, Rachel stood on Jack's small balcony, surveying the transformation that had occurred in both the space and her life. The previously dormant garden had been revitalized with winter-hardy plantings, ornamental kale, bright pansies, and fragrant herbs, now thriving in the terracotta pots. Rachel had taken to gardening with unexpected enthusiasm, finding meditative calm in the simple act of nurturing growing things. Inside the apartment, the sounds of Sophie practicing piano drifted through the open door, a new activity Rachel had introduced after discovering the child's interest in music. The living room now contained a keyboard set up near the window, while Sophie's artwork gallery had expanded to include pieces created during their weekend visits to various museums and cultural sites throughout New Jersey and New York. Jack emerged from the kitchen, carrying 2 mugs of coffee, joining Rachel on the balcony. The funding came through. Rachel nodded, still processing the news she'd received that morning. "Full commitment from Horizon Impact Fund. We can move forward with the research team intact, Dr. Patel has already submitted his resignation to Morgan Technologies." The milestone represented weeks of determined effort. Rachel had leveraged every professional connection, refined the business model through countless iterations, and persisted despite Richard's attempts to undermine her credibility with potential investors. The result secured funding for an independent entity focused on developing the cancer detection technology, with an explicit commitment to equitable distribution represented professional validation of her new path. Yet Rachel found her attention drawn less to this achievement than to the more personal transformation occurring alongside it. Over the past 2 months, her involvement in Jack and Sophie's lives had deepened from casual visits to integral connection. She now had keys to their apartment, a drawer containing personal items, and established routines that wove through their collective weekly schedule. "Congratulations, Dr. Morgan." Jack's use of the title she'd recently reclaimed, having been appointed research director for the new entity, carried affectionate teasing. "The clinical trials timeline looks promising." Rachel leaned against the railing, comfortable in the shared space they'd created. 18 months to preliminary results if recruitment goes as expected. Dr. Patel thinks we might see initial validation data even sooner based on retrospective analysis of existing imaging. The technical details flowed naturally between them, now Jack's medical background and Rachel's technological expertise, creating a shared language around her work. Unlike her previous romantic relationships, where partners had feigned interest in her career, while subtly undermining it, Jack engaged with genuine curiosity and supportive intelligence. Sophie's music practice concluded with a flourish, prompting Jack to check his watch. "We should leave in 15 minutes to make the movie." Sophie's been counting down the days until this animated release. Rachel nodded, finishing her coffee. The balance she discovered still sometimes felt miraculous, meaningful work that aligned with her values, developing a relationship with Jack that challenged and supported her authentic self, and unexpected joy in her growing connection with Sophie. As if summoned by the thought, Sophie bounded onto the balcony, excitement vibrating through her small frame. "Is it time to go yet? Can we get popcorn at the movie? With extra butter?" Jack laughed, ruffling his daughter's hair. "Yes to leaving soon. Yes to popcorn. Moderate on the butter, or we'll all have stomach aches." Sophie turned to Rachel, her expression shifting to something more serious. "I have a question before we go." Rachel knelt to the child's level, a habit she'd adopted from Jack. "What's your question, Sophie? Are you going to live with us soon?" "Because Emma at school says when grown-ups are in love, they live in the same house. And I think you and Daddy are in love because you look at each other like the princes and princesses in my books." The directness of the question created a moment of suspended time. Rachel glanced up at Jack, finding his expression a complex mixture of parental concern about his daughter's bluntness and genuine interest in Rachel's response. In that moment, Rachel realized how profoundly her approach to major life decisions had transformed. 6 months earlier, such a question would have triggered immediate risk assessment and strategic analysis. Now, looking at Sophie's earnest face and Jack's patient eyes, Rachel found herself guided by something more fundamental than calculation: emotional truth. "Your dad and I care about each other very much." Rachel chose her words carefully, respecting both Sophie's intelligence and the genuine complexity of adult relationships. "And yes, I think love is the right word for those feelings. But decisions about living together involve many considerations, including what would be best for you." Sophie considered this with serious attention. "I think it would be best for me if you lived here. Then you could help with my homework every night, not just sometimes, and we could have pancakes more often." The simple logic of childhood created unexpected emotion in Rachel's chest, not just because of Sophie's clear acceptance, but because of the unspoken weight behind Jack's steady gaze. They hadn't yet formally discussed cohabitation, though the natural progression of their relationship had been moving in that direction. Sophie had simply articulated what had been evolving organically between them. Jack knelt beside them, creating a small circle of connection on the balcony. "What do you think, Rachel?" His question held multiple layers, addressing both Sophie's immediate inquiry and the deeper consideration of their shared future. Rachel looked between them, this man and child, who had unexpectedly become the center of her reconfigured life. The corporate executive who had once measured success in stock prices and market share now found herself evaluating life's meaning through entirely different metrics. Moments of genuine connection, purposeful work with direct impact, and the profound joy of belonging, not to a professional title, but to people who valued her authentic self. "I think," Rachel began, her voice steady with certainty that had nothing to do with strategic calculation, "I think love defines family more than addresses or arrangements. But yes, Sophie, I would like to live with you and your dad someday soon, when we figured out the right timing for everyone." Jack's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining in what had become a familiar gesture of connection. The three of them remained in their small circle on the balcony, autumn sunlight casting gentle shadows across their faces. "3 months ago, I didn't know either of you existed." Rachel's voice carried wonder rather than regret. "I was so busy building what I thought was a successful life that I couldn't see what was missing from it." Sophie leaned against Rachel's side, accepting the adult conversation with the patient attention she often displayed. "Daddy says sometimes the best things come when we're not looking for them. Like when we found my pet rock collection at the beach when we were actually trying to build a sandcastle." Jack smiled at his daughter's comparison. "That's exactly right, Soph. Sometimes life's most important gifts arrive unexpectedly." Rachel thought of the airport confrontation that had started this journey, a moment of public humiliation that had unexpectedly opened the door to authentic connection. Had Andrew not accosted her that day, had Jack not intervened when others stood passive, had weather not grounded their flights and sent them seeking shelter together. How many alternate timelines existed where these relationships never formed? The airplane we never boarded turned out to be the best flight delay of my life. Rachel's observation carried both humor and profound gratitude. Who knew being stranded at Newark Airport would lead to all of this? Jack's expression softened with something deeper than affection. Sarah used to say that life's hardest moments often create openings for its greatest gifts, if we're brave enough to walk through those doors when they appear. The mention of Sarah brought no discomfort. Now her memory had been integrated into their evolving relationship through Jack's stories and Sophie's continued connection to her mother. Rachel had come to see that love expanded rather than divided when given room to grow naturally. I think she was very wise. Rachel squeezed Jack's hand gently, and I think she'd be proud of the family you've created. Jack's eyes held hers, the depth of emotion between them, requiring no additional words. Sophie, ever practical amid adult sentiment, broke the moment with characteristic 8-year-old priority setting. Can we talk about this more? After the movie, the popcorn is waiting. The simple redirection brought laughter, grounding their profound connection in the ordinary rhythm of family life. As they gathered coats and prepared to leave, Rachel found herself filled with quiet certainty that transcended her former strategic thinking. Success wasn't what she had once believed: corner offices and media profiles and market dominance. Success was this: helping Sophie button her coat while discussing movie snack options, catching Jack's warm gaze across the room, knowing her work would help patients who needed it most, feeling centered in her authentic self rather than a constructed corporate persona. Success was finding people who chose you daily and choosing them in return. Success was recognizing that ordinary moments, movie outings, and homework help in balcony gardens often contain life's most extraordinary gifts. Rachel followed Jack and Sophie out the door, locking it behind them with the key they'd given her weeks earlier. As they walked together down the stairs, Sophie chattering between them about movie expectations, Rachel felt the final pieces of her reconfigured life settling into place with the certainty of coming home.